You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The views expressed by the individuals during this broadcast are their own opinions, and they may not be the same as those of their group or other organizations they may be involved with.
All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Oh yeah, baby, that's lovely.
Good morning and welcome to Psychedelics and Cannabis Educational News. We're live here at paceradio.net from the legacy420.com news desk. And how are we doing today, Glenn?
We're doing absolutely great. We woke up on the right side of the grass today, so we're happy with that. Weather sucks, so I can't go riding, so I got to take my pleasure where I can get it, right?
Yes. Well, you know, it's always better to watch the grass grow than the roots.
Yeah, for sure it is. Makes it a good day when you're watching grass instead of roots.
That's right. Exactly. So, crappy weather, no ride stories today?
No ride stories today. We have a busy weekend, though, so we're having a poker run this weekend for Baca, so should be fun.
Good. And that's to raise money for what?
Baca, Bikers Against Child Abuse.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
That's why I got to get you to spell it right out what it meant.
Sorry about that. I should have just said that.
Yeah. It's a worthy cause, that's for sure.
It is. Great organization, good people.
Yeah, good. And are people able to donate to this thing?
I believe they can. They can go to baca.com. There's quite a few organizations. I'm St. John's chapter.
Yeah.
So, but there's chapters all over Canada, all over the States, and a whole bunch of places in the rest of the world.
Okay. All right. If people can look that up, if you know the website or whatever, take a look and help. What's that?
BACA, Baca.
Oh, BACA.com.ca. Okay.
Yeah, just look for Baca. You'll find it.
Okay, good stuff. All right. Talking about finding things, we found lots of news stories for today, so let's get at her. First one of the day. It comes to us from cannabis.net. Headline says, "Can magic mushrooms help with ADHD?" Here's what the latest medical studies say.
With over 366 million adults, that's a big number, around the world as of 2020, still struggling with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is ADHD. It's clear that we still have a long way to go in terms of treating this neurodevelopmental disorder. The primary markers of ADHD are persistent hyperactivity and a chronic inability to focus, so much so that it interferes with an adult or child's ability to function normally. There are several other ADHD symptoms, though they usually fall under either inattention or impulsivity. These can make it difficult to succeed academically and professionally, as well as in social settings and in personal relationships.
Given how common ADHD is, there have been many different types of medications that have been developed to help patients manage and reduce symptoms in all stages of life. Typically, a combination of medicines, lifestyle changes, and various types of therapy have been found to be effective for patients, so there is no one-size-fits-all solution. When it comes to medications, various stimulants and non-stimulants may be prescribed to the patients. Recently, cannabis or cannabis oil has been shown to be effective as an adjunct therapy for ADHD, complementing existing treatments given to patients. Cannabis, being all natural and non-addictive, helping to activate the reward system in the brain, thereby enabling the production of more dopamine than usual. Both THC and CBD have been shown to offer benefits for individuals with ADHD acting in different ways within the body.
And now, thanks to the current psychedelic revolution, we're discovering that magic mushrooms may be just among the psychedelic drugs that can also help with ADHD. According to a recent study published in the journal Frontiers in Psychiatry, microdosing magic mushrooms can help with focus and concentration, benefiting patients with ADHD. After all, disassociating and spacing out are some of the most common symptoms of ADHD.
For the study, the investigators analyzed 233 adults who were either diagnosed with ADHD or had symptoms similar to the condition. All of them expressed curiosity in microdosing. Elaine Hagen, the study's author and PhD candidate at the Maastricht University's Department of Neuropsychology and Pharmacology, explains to the Psych Post that some 30% of adults have ADHD and its hallmark symptoms are debilitating. Some studies even suggest that emotion regulation should be considered a core component of ADHD, as it's experienced by up to 70% by adults with ADHD. Emotion regulation involves all attempts to influence emotional experience and responses. For example, it may involve the ability to reinterpret an emotion eliciting situation, example, cognitive reappraisal, but also the inhibiting strong positive and negative emotional responses, example, excessive suppression, she adds. Now, empathy, says Hagen, is related to emotion regulation. When emotion regulation and or empathy are affected, individuals' social and emotional functions will also be affected.
Not one, but two studies were thereby conducted to best determine the microdosing psychedelics had an impact on adults who were struggling with severe HDAD symptoms. They found that after 4 weeks of microdosing, the first study participants reported drastic improvements when it came to emotional regulation as well as empathy. The scores for cognitive reappraisal also saw improvements, which suggested that the participants had better tools for dealing with tense and emotional situations that helped them reduce the negative impact. In addition, they saw a reduction in expressive suppression, which suggests that the participants weren't trying to withhold their emotional responses, which is a much healthier way to deal with one's emotions. Interestingly, the researchers also noted better perspective-taking scores.
Interesting, the researchers also noted better perspective-taking scores. Meanwhile, the second study used a control group for a more thorough analysis. They studied individuals with ADHD who were using their standard ADHD medication, so they weren't microdosing. This was done in order to give them a better idea of how traditional ADHD medications fared compared to microdosing. They found that the group who was microdosing reported more dramatic improvements in ADHD symptoms, especially in terms of emotional regulation. But there were no significant differences between the two when they assessed cognitive reappraisal. Now, Hagen goes on to say that we compared individuals with ADHD who were microdosing to individuals with ADHD who were using conventional ADHD medications. We found that microdosing compared to conventional ADHD medication induced positive effects on core ADHD symptoms. And one aspect of the emotional regulation, expressive suppression, which might indicate improved emotional regulation after 4 weeks of microdosing compared to baseline.
Breakthroughs such as the use of magic mushrooms or cannabis for ADHD are important and always will be. Just because medications that work in the market doesn't mean it will always stay that way. Keep in mind that patients can actually develop resistance to treatment over time, which will inevitably reduce the effectiveness of any medicine. New treatments and medications being developed are essential so that ADHD patients can be offered alternative therapeutics if they are no longer responding to their current medicines.
We specifically need more natural and plant-based medications for ADHD, just like magic mushrooms and cannabis. That's because stimulants and other conventional treatments of ADHD have questionable safety when it comes to long-term use. Meanwhile, cannabis and mushrooms are safer for use in the long run. It also needs to be said that the side effects of common ADHD prescription drugs such as Adderall and Ritalin can often be so horrible that they the patients taking them from living a normal quality of life on top of ADHD symptoms at that. For example, Ritalin side effects include headaches, nervousness, anxiety, appetite loss, dizziness, and stomach pain, among others. Meanwhile, Adderall is known to cause insomnia, elevated blood pressure and heart rate, dry mouth, dizziness, heart problems, mental health problems, and much more. Oh, and on a side note, some people have told me Ritalin is very similar to cocaine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
We need more studies to develop studies delving deep into the benefits of magic mushrooms and psychedelics for ADHD. It's clear that this is a promising therapeutic alternative to traditional ADHD drugs. While this condition may be notoriously hard to treat, there's now more hope than ever.
There you go. That's the end of the story. That's all she wrote. So there you go. Yeah, people microdosing, because when you're microdosing, you're not getting buzzed or anything.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand that you don't get a buzz microdosing. It's
No,
just
you
for the
don't.
medicine alone.
Correct. Exactly. All right, here we go on to the next story, and this comes to us from Canada Tech today, and it says study finds no increase in hospitalizations following legalization in Canada.
Canada became the first G7 nation to adopt a national adult use cannabis legalization measure back in late 2018. The only other nation to adopt a national legalization measure prior to Canada was Uruguay in 2013. However, Uruguay still does not permit legal sales to non-residents. Malta, Luxembourg, Germany, and South Africa have all adopted national legalization measures to some degree since Canada adopted its measure. Yet Canada remains the only country on the planet where adult consumers can make illegal purchases across the nation regardless of their residence status.
A team of researchers recently examined hospitalization data in Canada before and after adult use legalization. The researchers determined that there was no increase in hospitalization post-legalization. The investigators tracked rates of cannabis-related hospitalizations in Alberta in the years prior to and following legalization. Canadian lawmakers legalized the use and sale of cannabis flowers for those 18 and older back in 2018. And retailers began engaging in the sales of concentrates and edibles in 2020, as we know.
Researchers identified an increase in hospitalizations among those ages 18 to 24 in the period immediately prior to legalization, but they acknowledged that there were no increases in hospitalizations following legalizations among representative of any age group. Legalization has not significantly associated with immediate or ongoing changes in hospitalization rates for either younger or older adults, the study authors concluded.
Yeah, they say separate Canadian analyses have failed to identify an increase in either traffic-related hospitalizations or ER visits attributed to cannabis-related psychosis following legalization.
And we read a story last week about drunk drivers and high drivers causing all kinds of problems, but obviously they're not going to the hospital.
Well, they said that they were finding more people had consumed cannabis in the accidents, but what they also noted in that report was that that did not indicate that the cannabis was the cause or the fault of the accidents. As you know, as we discussed back then, you went 31 or 32 days.
Yep.
You tested positive.
Yep.
So, that percentage of people, they could have been consumed 2 weeks prior to the accident. And
2 weeks, 2 days, even one day, you're not high at all, but you still can get convicted of drunk driving or driving under the influence.
Yeah, and you would show as a positive in that survey that was done. Yeah, Tamara and I talked about it last night in the Pace Radio show as well. Alrighty, there we go. On to the next one. This one comes to us from the Marijuana Moment, and the headline on it says, the Supreme Court nuked cannabis rescheduling with its Chevron ruling. And they say this is an op-ed.
The regulatory state has been in full force since, ironically, 1984 with the institution of the Chevron doctrine. Chevron has required courts to defer to the expertise of administrative agencies when the legislative intent of an underlying law is ambiguous, which made it a cornerstone of how regulators and businesses interact. On Friday, the Supreme Court's Republican-appointed majority demolished the doctrine, overturning the broad authority of the administrative state and raising fresh questions about how cannabis will be regulated moving forward.
I'm just trying to get rid of this little video there. There we go. Regulatory oversight and enforcement weren't perfect in any field under Chevron, and in cannabis regulation has been a unique frustration to operators because the regulatory infrastructure is still being built and the norms are still being defined. So it is tempting to look at anything that curtails regulation as a positive for cannabis. Now, this was a federal law. I think they took down some state stuff. But the truth is, Chevron being overruled in the way that the Supreme Court of the United States. Yeah, my screen jumped on me. Overruled, it is bad for operators who crave certainty. Very, very bad. It is tough to overstate how much chaos this ruling will create for cannabis operators. Not that we aren't used to it by now.
In broad strokes, it means that rescheduling is already functionally dead as a matter of policy. Rescheduling has been moving forward as a regulatory rather than a legislative change, and now regulations do not hold the same force of law as they did just last week. Those who mapped out the long-awaited move to Schedule 3 now need to grapple with massively increased judicial scrutiny and regulatory uncertainty. Opponents have a strong chance of ending rescheduling by winning on the law. If they don't, they could still achieve the same goal by using the appeals process to postpone the new regulation for years. Or, as the Supreme Court said, the president is supreme. He can just order whatever he wants.
I have some terrible news for anyone who thinks it took the White House too long to put rescheduling into motion, which is only modest progress towards equitable drug policy anyways. In this post, Chevron environment prohibitionists will abuse the courts to drag the process out longer, possibly indefinitely. That sound you hear is big law partners using $100 bills to light their cigars. On top of that, operators can also expect a complete shit show, and yes, that's what it says, whenever new regulations are enacted, for good or ill.
For the good, we have a chance to successfully challenging previous obstinate regulators who defied the legislative dictates of the people. On the ill side, this will discourage the consumer protections that cannabis operators want, and prohibitionists will latch onto that, resulting lax safety standards in their campaigns of deceit and fear-mongering. Liquor companies and opiate manufacturers are ripping out their checkbooks as I type this.
In fact, rescheduling is already being challenged and the comment period isn't even over yet. Opponents, both from the industry, within the industry and outside, have been organized, looking for any angle that would prevent the move. The door that the Supreme Court threw open in its Chevron repeal is now extremely largely likely target. But perhaps this will give us a chance to scrap their restrictive proposal and do this right.
With the end of Chevron deference, courts will be independently interpreting statutes, will likely rule as unconstitutional broad delegations of authority from Congress and that lack clear guidelines. Rescheduling opponents will argue that the Controlled Substances Act lacks the clarity needed for regulators to have the authority to add, remove, or reschedule substances on the controlled substances list. They argue that the CSA's broad language grants too much discretion to the Attorney General without adequate congressional oversight or clear standards. Opponents will also probably argue that the ability to remove substances like cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act list should be a decision made by Congress entirely, given its original placement there by Congress and the significant policy implications.
These arguments are probably pretty solid in the objective sense. They'd be at least moderately convincing to most judges, and they'd be gas station crack to activist judges who want to move forward and revisit the country's failed experiments with criminalization and capricious enforcement.
Nice words.
So it's highly likely that, yeah, exactly. It's highly likely the rescheduling proposal will die in our courts. Whether this outcome is positive or negative depends on one's opinion about rescheduling in the first place. Regardless of feelings on the matter, I won't be holding my breath for those 280E tax exemptions anytime soon.
Congress does not have the power to fix all of this, but if does have the power. But if legislators want to avoid a return to the Wild West attitudes of the 70s that led to the Chevron decision in the first place, they'll need to roll their sleeves up and do some real work. Good luck on that one. Congress will need to create clearer laws instead of passing off these duties to regulators who may understand the nuances better but aren't elected by the people. And the cannabis industry will face new and interesting challenges as a result. Personally, I believe that there's very little point in creating a law or regulation that no one will follow. Cannabis is already legal in half the nation, and it's high time to remove it from the schedule altogether. Time to light a fire under Congress's collective bottoms.
Yeah, exactly. Just remove it completely, as they said. There's no use maintaining it.
I wonder if that could be done by executive order. Seems like they can do anything they want, so why not?
Maybe. Well, yeah. You just never know. All righty. On to our last story before we go to break. And this one is coming to us from Green State. And the headline on it says, Psychedelics late in life may impact brain function. Let's hope that's just for a positive and not for a negative.
Seniors have been consuming cannabis at more rapid rates than ever, and for good reason. Mounting research supports that those aged 65 and up experience an increased quality of life with the proper cannabis. One of the most recently published collections of data sought to understand whether cannabis, LSD, or other hallucinogens would impact cognitive decline. Data researchers used information gathered from the Midlife in the United States study, which is MIDAS, collected information from almost 3,500 English speakers in the contiguous 48 U.S. states in 3 waves. Research scientists honed in on whether people used cannabis, LSD, peyote, MDMA, mescaline, or other hallucinogens within the last 12 months.
The third wave of MIDAS measures episodic memory and executive function with the brief test of adult cognition by telephone. Participants engaged in tests like free recall of words, number series completion, timed counting tasks, and other approved tests. The results from these tests were measured against standard deviations of the entire wave 3 response sample. Survey results also showed that those who consumed psychedelics had fewer depressive symptoms. This is even more promising for cognitive function in later years as experienced depression has been associated with dementia later in life. I don't know if that quote right above that is out of the story or part of the story. So go ahead and read that.
The current findings reveal that psychedelic use was associated with improved cognitive function assessed by executive function, partially supporting our hypothesis. However, the same association was not evident with episodic memory, the study reads.
No.
And limitations were there, like the fact that the understanding the true impact of psychedelic therapy requires a lengthy integration process. A one-time survey doesn't track this trajectory appropriately. The vast age range also leaves the windows open for generalizability bias, which has been known to inflate preliminary study results.
Another limitation was a hesitancy to try psychedelics. Only 8% of participants had used psychedelics. A small percentage, 1.5%, refused to respond after psychedelic uses at all. Limitations aside, there was information gleaned from the data analysis. There were a few caveats to consider when digesting this data. The analysis also considered age, gender, race, marital status, education and employment, Researchers clocked any chronic conditions, tobacco and alcohol use too. With all of this combined, a statistical analysis of tripping and cognitive function came into focus.
Study authors point to these results as a blossoming research lane for those seeking reprieve for seniors battling depression, isolation, or hopelessness. Perhaps the compounds could even stop these things before they start. The only way to know is with continued research.
Yeah, there you go. Research, continue the research.
Which they would have started this 30 or 40 years ago.
Yeah. Exactly. I don't know if I missed a story or what going on here. Something seems a little out whacked. But we'll continue on. Here we go. The next story is coming to us. Yeah, I got the right one. From The Guardian, and it says, cannabis will likely soon be legally classified as medicine. But for what?
The Drug Enforcement Administration proposed rules earlier this year that would officially give cannabis status as a medication rather than an illegal narcotic. That's exciting news for researchers, but will rescheduling mean that cannabis could soon move from the dispensary to the drugstore? No, because rescheduling seems like it's not going to happen right away.
Yeah.
Experts say it's not that simple.
Peter Grinspoon is a physician, a Harvard Medical School instructor, and author of the book Seeing Through the Smoke, says that the upshot of rescheduling will be a little bit incoherent. Under the new rules, cannabis would be reclassified as a Schedule III drug, meaning any cannabis-based medications would probably require FDA approval and a doctor's prescription. This will mean it would still be more regulated than alcohol and tobacco, says Grinspoon, even though it is safer by every metric. Meanwhile, cannabis will continue to be available at state legal dispensaries without the FDA's sign-off.
The most important change is symbolic, Greenspoon says, because the U.S. government is once again admitting that cannabis is a medicine. It's currently very difficult to get permission from the federal government to do research on the cannabis plant. Greenspoon thinks rescheduling could make it easier to study medicinal cannabis by easing stigma as well as legal restrictions. Cannabis isn't magically different from everything else, he says. It's less harmful than opiates, but it still has harms. And if you use it, you should want to know the harms. People on both sides of the debate are going to be sort of forced to contend with reality.
Grinspoon is particularly keen to see research on whether cannabis could actually fight diseases. He says cannabis is very good at alleviating symptoms. We already know that. We know that it helps with chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting. We know that it helps with pain. I'm interested to know if cannabis can help modify the course of diseases versus just treat the symptoms, he says. Like in the test tube, cannabis is very good at treating killing cancer cells, but cannabis hasn't been shown to cure cancer in humans yet, just in the test tube, he says.
And Igor Grant, who's long one of a select few with authorizations to study cannabis in a lab, thinks the drug could be especially useful for certain conditions that resist existing treatments. Grant is a psychiatrist and director of the Center for Medical Cannabis Research at the University of California, San Diego. Established in 2000 to help fulfill the mission of California's 1999 Marijuana Research Act. Rescheduling would mean those decades of research could benefit from a much bigger group of patients. Neuropathic pain continues to be an important direction, said Grant. It's associated with many conditions, including HIV infection, multiple sclerosis, and spinal injuries, and is difficult to treat and really impairs quality of life. If you can't sleep at night because of this condition and the meds you're taking are not very helpful, that's bad.
Jana Markku, author of the book Cannabis Innovations on Cannabis and Hemp Regulation, says that in order to get FDA approval, cannabis-derived drugs would probably need to either be synthetic or extensively refined. There are already some FDA-approved medications on the market that are related to cannabis, such as dronabinol, first approved in 1985 for chemotherapy-induced nausea as well as age-related anorexia. Contains a synthetic version of THC. It's not plant-based.
Yeah. More recently, the 2018 Farm Bill created the possibility for medications actually derived from the cannabis plant. It lifted restrictions on products that contain less than 0.3% delta-9 THC, believed to be the plant's most intoxicating component. So far, the FDA has only approved one cannabis plant-derived drug, Epidiolex, a pharmaceutical-grade formulation of CBD that treats rare seizures. A rescheduling would mean that the FDA approves similar products made from plant-derived delta-9 THC, although the agency rarely approves plant-derived drugs.
What's that tell you? Even drugs that originally came from plants tend to be manufactured. Grant says that people figured out what were the active molecules, and then they figured out how to make those. But still, he says he is hopeful that the FDA's approval of Psychedelics will mean that other cannabis plant-derived medications will be approved. Marco says this type of medication can offer precise dosing and consistency, but will lack the full spectrum of compounds provided by a crude extract.
The FDA requires drugs to be precisely formulated to assure safety and consistency. Since the cannabis plant contains hundreds of different cannabinoids and terpenes, it's unlikely the FDA would ever authorize unrefined products like the ones available in dispensaries. Greenspoon says that separating out cannabis's compounds hinders the entourage effect of all of them working in concert. He says that even though the AIDS patients have access to FDA-approved synthetic cannabis, may prefer the whole plant for that reason. He hopes for a more diverse array of cannabis-derived medicines, not just more formulations of its biggest components, CBD and THC. Many cannabinoids have not yet been researched much, but show promise.
I know. He goes on to say that there's one called THCV, which lowers appetite and blood sugar and increases insulin sensitivity. I mean, that's a pharmaceutical gold mine to try to dig into what each of those do and how we could exploit them medically. It's just going to be short of infinity. So there's a team of lawyers from the rich and the powerful trying to stop. Oh, that's from Publishing Stories. That's the end of it. Yep, that's the end of the article. Yep. There you go. So we'll see what happens there.
Interesting that they don't think they'll ever authorize just the actual plant because it contains too much.
Exactly. Yeah, there's too much there, and they won't want to do it. And I got the cat wrapped around my ankles down here, wanting to be scratched. And just so you know, yeah, we went one story too long. It is break time, and after the break, we'll get back right at her. You're watching Psychedelics and Cannabis Educational News here at PaceRadio.net.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at PaceRadio.net.
Cannabis edibles are an effective way to manage pain and other ailments, especially when you deal with your trusted partner, Legacy 420, in Tyendinaga Mohawk territory. You see, we lab test every product on site to ensure proper dosage every time, which is critical when consuming cannabis edibles. All Legacy 420 edibles are made by our classically trained baker and chocolatier, and we also have super tasty vegan options.
Our baker has been in the industry for 25 years. She's also a chocolatier. Everything from savory to sweet, your chocolate bars, brownies, butter tarts, you name it, we make it.
Talk to our knowledgeable Cannatex about our incredible variety available. Give your trusted partners a call. Legacy 420 out on your road.
In February of 2022, the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club and Ted Smith were fined $6.5 million. This for helping 8,500 patients with access to medical cannabis. In our interview with Ted, he spoke to us about how people can donate to help in an upcoming court challenge. And here is part of that interview. From what I've seen lately, I believe that you've got something that you're trying to do as far as fundraising to deal with this next court challenge.
For now, people can write checks directly to Jack Lloyd Law Corporation or send e-transfers to savethevcbc@gmail.com. I guess those are the two easiest ways for people to help right now.
PACE Radio is the People Advocating Cannabis Education Radio Network.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
We are People Advocating Cannabis Education here at paceradio.net.
And you're back with Psychedelics and Cannabis Education News right here on paceradio.net. Well, Glenn, being we did an extra story before the break, we've only got 3 for the second half, but that's fine. We've got some interesting stuff, especially this one. You had never heard of it before, and it comes to us from Entrepreneur, and that says Kentucky's largest school district approves student medical cannabis policy.
Members of Kentucky's Jefferson County Board of Education last week approved a policy allowing students to take prescribed medical cannabis on school property. The Louisville Courier-Journal reports Jefferson County is the state's largest school district. The policy requires medical cannabis to be administered out of the view of other students. Kentucky's medical cannabis law allows for medical cannabis use administration on school grounds, but the district must approve a policy first. I bet you this is going to be shot down in a hurry.
We'll find out, yeah. In an interview with the Courier-Journal, Jefferson County Public Schools spokesman Mark Herbert said the policy is no different than school nurses, nurse practitioners, or other trained school staff administering other tightly controlled substances like Ritalin or Adderall to a student. Now, Herbert says that we anticipate most medicinal cannabis will be given to students at home, but there may be times when the doctor or prescription calls for the medicine to be given during school hours.
I'm really, really curious now. What have they been doing? Like, do they have to go home if they need to administer cannabis in the middle of the school?
Yeah, well, maybe there is no law, and yeah, this is bringing one in so the kids can get their medication, which is a good thing.
Yeah. Medical cannabis is not yet available in Kentucky. The state started accepting applications on July 1st, and the first businesses are expected to be licensed in a lottery process in October, with products expected to be available beginning January 1st, 2025.
So is the school board getting ahead of the state by getting
this? And I can see this being shot down in a flash before it's even enacted.
Let's hope not for the kids. Think of the children. Isn't that what they always say? Think of the children.
They always use it when they're trying to get you to do something that you shouldn't be doing, though.
That's right. Exactly. Okay, here we go on to the next story. This one comes to us from Psych Post, and it says psychedelic compound reduces cluster headache frequency by 50% in new study.
A recent study published in the Journal of Neurological Sciences has found that psilocybin and psychoactive compounds in psychedelic magic mushrooms can reduce the frequency of cluster headaches. This research builds on anecdotal reports and preliminary studies, offering the first controlled evidence of psilocybin's potential as a treatment for this debilitating condition. Cluster headaches are one of the most excruciating types of headaches, often characterized by severe burning or piercing pain, and typically occurs around one eye or one side of the head. These headaches, which can last from 15 minutes to 3 hours, often strike suddenly and recur multiple times a day, frequently at the same time each day.
Oh, the pain is so intense that it has been nicknamed the suicide headache due to the desperation it can cause in sufferers. That's sort of like the nerve in there's a nerve in your face that can do the same thing. And that's called something about a suicide nerve is what that does. Alison Merton deals with that. Unlike migraines, cluster headaches are generally not accompanied by nausea or sensitivity to light and sound, but they can be accompanied by other symptoms such as redness in the eye, nasal congestion, and restlessness. Anecdotal reports and preliminary research suggest that psilocybin might offer relief, but there was a lack of rigorous scientific evidence to support these claims. This drove Emmanuel Schindler, an assistant professor at neurology at Yale School of Medicine, and her colleagues to investigate whether psilocybin could provide a safe and effective treatment for cluster headache sufferers.
The study was designed as an extension of a pilot study that had previously examined the effects of psilocybin on cluster headaches. The researchers recruited 16 adults between 21 and 65 years who experienced cluster headaches but had no other serious medical or psychiatric conditions. These participants had previously been involved in the initial study and were eligible to return for a second round of participation after at least 6 months from their last test day. Participants were randomly assigned to receive either 3 doses of psilocybin or a placebo, with sessions spaced approximately 5 days apart. The psilocybin was administered in a carefully controlled setting, and both participants and research staff blinded to the dose given. Participants maintained headache diaries starting 2 weeks before and continuing up till 8 weeks after the first session, documenting the frequency, duration, and intensity of their headaches. But if this is a study and they're giving people placebo and psilocybin, wouldn't you know whether you got a placebo or psilocybin?
I would think so, yeah. The study was approved by the necessary regulatory bodies, including the Veteran Affairs Connecticut Healthcare System and Yale University, and was conducted under an investigational new drug application with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Funding for the extensive phase came from Servia Life Sciences. Schindler and her team found that psilocybin significantly reduced the frequency of cluster headaches. Participants who received psilocybin experienced nearly a 50% reduction in the number of headaches attacks per week. On average, the weekly attacks decreased from 18.4 to 9.8. That's pretty close to half, marking a substantial improvement. This reduction was observed in both episodic and chronic cluster headaches sufferers, although the effects approached but did not always reach statistical significance in some subgroups.
Additionally, the study noted that the therapeutic benefits of psilocybin appeared to be independent of its hallucinogenic effects. This suggests that the relief provided by psilocybin might not be linked to its ability to induce altered states of consciousness, which is a key finding for considering psilocybin's broader therapeutic applications. The researchers also reported significant reductions in pain severity and the need for abortive medications. Pain severity dropped by about 10% on a numerical rating scale, and the use of medications to stop attacks fell by 37%, indicating an overall improvement in the quality of life for participants.
Importantly, the study reported no serious adverse effects, reinforcing the safety of psilocybin when administered in a controlled setting. Common side effects include nausea, fatigue, and cluster attacks during the dosing sessions, but these were self-limiting and manageable. But the results of this study are encouraging. There are several caveats to consider. First, the sample size was small, with only 10 participants completing the extension phase. This limits the generalizability of the findings and underscores the need for larger studies to confirm these results. The study was also did not include a comparison with other preventive treatments, making it difficult to assess how psilocybin stacks up against existing options. Despite these limitations, the study represents a significant step forward in understanding the potential of psilocybin as a treatment for cluster headaches. The findings suggest that psilocybin can reduce the frequency and severity of attacks, offering hope to those who have found little relief from traditional treatments. However, further research with larger, more diverse samples and longer follow-up periods is necessary to fully gauge the safety and efficacy of psilocybin for this condition.
The study psilocybin. Oh, yeah, that's just the name of the study.
Yeah, correct. So there you go.
Interesting. About almost 50% of the people experience a great. I guess that changes your life.
Yeah, exactly. It can obviously improve the quality of life.
I don't know how many people experience migraines or cluster headaches like this, but I've had really, I don't know if they're migraines, but really bad headaches. And it's a horrible thing. I couldn't imagine it being worse than that.
Oh, yeah. Cluster headaches don't sound like too much fun to me. No.
Something I don't ever want to experience. Yes,
exactly. All right. Now to the last story of the day, and this comes to us from the Motley Fool. And it says, this is what a cannabis executive thinks is going to happen in the industry in the next 10 to 15 years. What do you think? We haven't read the story, so it'd be interesting to find out. What do you think?
It's interesting. I think there's going to be a lot of bankruptcies and a lot of companies joining together.
Could be. All right, go ahead.
Investors aren't all that thrilled with cannabis stocks, and it's understandable. Despite all the hype around legalization, there simply hasn't been any substantial progress to have investors believe that significant reform beyond just rescheduling cannabis as a less dangerous illegal drug is around the corner. And many cannabis producers are struggling because of the federal ban on pot. Companies can't transport products across state lines, and even obtaining banking services is a challenge. But whether legalization takes place or not, there is going to be a significant change coming to the cannabis industry one way or another. The losses companies are experiencing and the cash they are burning through simply makes the operations of many of them unsustainable, and that could lead to a whole lot more consolidation.
Yeah, Boris Jordan is the executive chairman of Curaleaf, one of the U.S. largest multi-state operators. Last year, the cannabis producer generated more than $1.3 billion in revenue. But while the company has more than doubled its top line in a span of 3 years, its losses have grown at a much faster pace. He believes there is going to be a whole lot more consolidation coming for the industry due to the current challenges. He says, in the U.S., we definitely need consolidation because the cost structure is completely out of whack. Within the next 10 to 15 years, Jordan expects that there will be between 5 and 10 companies dominating the industry.
I hate that, but I think he's actually right. Yeah. I just hate that it's going to be dominated by big, huge corporations, not mom and pop.
Craft is what we need. Small craft people.
Yeah. I'd argue that there aren't 10 big cannabis companies in the industry as it is. Many generate much less than $1 billion in annual in annual revenue. But over the next decade, there will be a lot more industry growth and larger companies may emerge as that happens. By 2030 alone, the global cannabis market could be worth more than $444 billion, according to estimates from Fortune Business Insights. That's more than 7 times what it was worth in 2023. And there's a nice big chart here showing the growth.
Down. Like, you know,
by
yeah.
consolidating, companies can easily expand across the country and reach more customers. And if regulatory issues improve over the years, that can also drastically affect the prospects for profitability for many cannabis companies, making them better investments in the long run. Yeah, it's all down in that chart.
Exactly. And as of now, the situation is just untenable for many companies. Big names such as Cureleaf, Trueleaf Cannabis, Canopy Growth, and Tilray brands all struggle to stay out of the red. Consolidation is nothing new for the industry and is by no means a silver bullet for companies. But if there were just a few large cannabis companies dominating the industry and not a whole lot of fragmentation, it could result in better revenue growth, improved efficacy, and healthier margins.
How about we get better medicine instead of healthier margins and revenue?
Yeah,
growth?
I know, eh? I know exactly. The story goes on into something else from there, so I just shut her down. It'll be interesting to see what happens in 10 or 15 years. I hope it's not controlled by a few huge companies. I hope it's more of a craft industry, just smaller companies that are operating.
I have the same hopes as you. I'm very. I don't think that will happen. I think everything. The corporations want to control everything, and this is too much money and too many people to have under control to not try and take control of everything.
It's I'm surprised there's been all these losses and stuff like that, because everybody expected legalization was going to be a big hit. And
well, it
the
is.
Only people who really made the money were the people who got in early and got out early.
Yeah, and the big companies that built these massive indoor cultivation places almost all lost.
Oh yeah. All those big giant companies, big places are shut down or sold.
But the mom and pops, I think we could have a really good industry and actually support people that are working for themselves.
Yeah. There was one article that we missed out on, that we didn't bring in, and that was, there's a place, I think it was Minnesota or somewhere, one of the places in the States, where they're actually going to allow homegrown cannabis to be sold.
See, in my opinion, that's the best way to do it. I mean, I grew up with homegrown cannabis. I mean, most of us did that used cannabis prior to legalization. In the 90s and the late 80s, when I was younger, I used cannabis, and there definitely was some bad growers, of course, and there was some really, really good growers.
Yeah, and there still is.
There still is some in the cannabis industry that are good growers and are craft people and mom and pop stores, but it's few and far between, and it's rigged against them.
Right. Yeah. Oh, there it is, right there. It's Minnesota. They say homegrown cannabis sales legal under Minnesota Constitution, according to some advocates there in Minnesota. So it'll be interesting to see if in Minnesota they can start selling their homegrown cannabis at the farmers market, just like your tomatoes and cucumbers.
I wish they could, but I highly doubt that's going to be a broad thing, because the way alcohol is. They're trying to structure cannabis sales the same way they structure alcohol sales, even though alcohol has no medicinal value.
Yeah, well, they're probably looking at it as the alcohol gets people drunk, cannabis gets people stoned. So they're probably looking at them as being equals.
In my own humble opinion, I think all cannabis use is therapeutic use.
Mm-hmm.
People use this for something, and I'm not saying people don't use beer or alcohol to get away from things, but it's not a medicine. It's not going to help them with it.
Well, it's a depressant
too,
right?
Pardon?
And alcohol is a depressant as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've been an advocate for a long time for cannabis, and I think, like I said, I think it's a medicine for everybody. I think it helps you escape a little bit from the bad things in your life.
Yeah, which can relieve stress, which leads to all kinds of conditions, autoimmune conditions that people have to deal with.
And I think it should be stress for use. It is starting to be for military people, PTSD and things like that. I think it should be really stressed for cops and firefighters and anybody who has to deal with a lot of stress on the job.
Yeah.
And they're fighting this tooth and nail, the government, I guess. But it has to be taken as a medicine, not as alcohol. That's what they're taking it as, alcohol.
They're taking it as alcohol.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that we should mention before we sign off here today, as I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, today is July the 4th. So happy whatever you call it down in the U.S. The people
Independence Day.
Independence Day, is that what it is? All right. Happy July the 4th. That's all I know it as, and that's our July 1st, right? Their July 4th. So
yeah.
All righty. Other than that, anything you want to say before we sign off?
Nope. Happy July 4th. Peace, everybody.
All right. That's a report for today from our Legacy420.com news desk. Thanks to our buds at the Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, as well as Legacy420.com and Limestone City Hydroponics.ca. Other than that, don't forget to educate, medicate, and do not incarcerate.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
When you have a pain that's reached its peak, Legacy for 20 is so unique. If organic cannabis is what you seek, here's your trusted partners 7 days a week. Suppository salves, vapes and drops, topicals, edibles, infused pop. Just when life seems like it ain't easy, at Legacy 420 enjoy a pop freezy. Lab tested products make them the GOAT. Legacy 420 out on your road. Legacy 420 in Tyndonega Mohawk territory. Indigenous organic cannabis at its finest.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420. We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.